commentary, entertainment, sports, news, and opinion now. Here is Steve Malzberg.
When asked who the worst president since World War II was, this is what the poll found. 33% Barack Obama, 28% George W. Bush, 13% Richard Nixon. More unpopular than Nixon. Carter, Clinton, Reagan, right there. You can see their numbers as well. Here's the thing, though. Isn't it always whoever is in the White House is the worst we've ever had?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that going on. People's presidential popularity tends to rise after presidents leave office, without question. I mean, it's very hard for me to think that history is going to judge Barack Obama harsher than Richard Nixon.
Oh, no, that could never happen. All right, folks, welcome back. That was MSNBC's take on the poll that we've been talking about from Quinnipiac University. Joining us now is Ed Rollins, our friend, Republican campaign consultant and advisor to and former national campaign director for the Reagan-Bush 84 campaign. And Ed, good to talk to you again, sir. Do we have Ed?
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I
hear.
do.
Can you
Yes,
hear
I
me?
do. I do now, Ed. Thank you. Yes.
Great.
Sorry about that. Okay, so let's start with the poll, and welcome back. I mean, they have a little bit of a point, I would imagine, although the point here of making note of the fact that Barack Obama ranks dead last here, or you know, behind people like Nixon and Carter and all the other presidents since World War II, is that he was supposed to be the savior. He was supposed to bring us all together. He was so popular. He got reelected. We hear he had a mandate when he got reelected, and here 2 years later, he's ranked at the bottom.
Well, he's failed miserably on many, many fronts, and you know, he was probably the least experienced man to be president at the time that he came into office, when you had an economic crisis, which he knew very little about economics. He knew nothing about military affairs, and obviously inherited 2 wars, and knew very little about how to deal with the Congress, even though he'd been briefly a U.S. senator. So my sense is that his failure should not shock us, but at the end of the day, when the country turns on a president, as this one has, it's awful, awful hard to do anything effective in the next, certainly in the next 2 years. The likelihood is he's going to lose the Senate, or certainly lose, his party's going to lose Senate seats. And then you've got 2 years without an agenda, with chaos in the world, economic crisis. And can you really say anything in this country is better than it was when he took office?
I certainly can't. Let me just throw one more in before we get to some of the other things he's been involved in or not involved in. Ronald Reagan being at the top of that poll, the most admired president in the post-World War II era. And this is, you know, this is in spite of the bashing in the media that this man has taken, not only, you know, during his presidency and the aftermath of his presidency, but even after his death. In many respects. So this is, I find this to be encouraging.
Well, it's encouraging. And the interesting thing is Reagan came into office, you know, I was a part of his White House. Obviously, the privilege of running his campaign. Reagan came into office with 3 premises of things he wanted to do. First, people forget at that point in time the Soviets were very much on the move. They were in Afghanistan. They were in Latin America. They were building themselves militarily. We hadn't since the Vietnam War. He was going to rebuild the defenses of the country. People have a tendency to forget we had 70+% taxes at that point in time. Reagan obviously wanted to stimulate the economy by reducing taxes, which was very effective. And the third thing that he did is he wanted to get government off the backs of small business, which he certainly did. Any one of those would have been a major accomplishment. He covered all 3. And probably the most important, obviously the tax code was important, but rebuilding the defenses of the country, considering all the activities that have taken place since his administration. The military that was demoralized basically has been as effective as any military in our history. The equipment that he basically built, the planes, the ships, all the various things we've used in the Gulf Wars, and obviously even today, were all basically because of his will and his ability to move that stuff through Congress.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No doubt about that. Let me ask you about a remark, since we're talking Reagan here, a remark that was made by Hillary recently in one of the interviews where she talked about the economy and that Obama has tried his best. He's done some good things. He saved us from going, you know, over the cliff. But she said, if you really want to see, you know, an economy, look at what my husband did, as if saying that that's how she would run things. And then she actually uttered the phrase, you know, compare it to Ronald Reagan's economy. And I found that striking. And sure, you know, Bill Clinton was dragged kicking and screaming on many issues that, to his credit, that did help the economy. But he was also the beneficiary of the internet bubble. and that created millions and millions of jobs. Ronald Reagan took over an economy from Jimmy Carter that was worse in many respects than the economy that Obama inherited. So I'd love to see somebody have that debate with Hillary on the Reagan economy versus the Clinton economy.
Well, I'd be very happy to have that debate, and I'm certainly don't put myself in the same position as the former First Lady or the former Senator or the former Secretary of State, if I know the facts. And the facts were these, just as you articulated them: more jobs were created, more taxes were paid, the economy stimulated very, very quickly. People have a tendency, particularly in the Clinton administration, to forget that a lot of the benefits, not just the internet boom and what have you, the tech boom that you talked about, but you also had a Congress that was controlled by Republicans, and they worked collectively together to reduce welfare, to reduce a whole bunch of things. So the president likes to pat himself on the back and take credit, former President Clinton, for balancing the budget. At the end of the day, the Congress balanced the budget. Congress passes taxes, passes bills. It basically does all of that sort of stuff. And it's nice when the president is a part of that. But I can argue that the Republican Congress was very, very influential. Reagan did not have. He had the Senate for 6 years, but never had the House, and passed all of his major legislation. Democrats controlling a big portion of the system.
And even though he never went across the street and had beer with Tip O'Neill, as the myth has been perpetuated by Chris Matthews in his book and by others, nonetheless, he did get things done and did forge relationships where this president, even with members of his own party, they'll tell you, as you know, he has no relationships with hardly anybody in Congress. Let's talk a little bit about this IRS situation. There is a court date next week. We had the Judicial Watch attorney on, and they're going to court with the IRS next week. They've been in court in their effort to get more documents and emails. And he said something very interesting, that the IRS has never notified the court or Judicial Watch that there are any lost emails, that there are any missing documents or emails, or that anything's been thrown away or is irretrievable. And that I've talked to other people who have covered this for the media, and they say that is a very interesting development, and it's going to be interesting to see how that's dealt with in court now that you have another federal judge again telling the IRS they have to explain what happened to these emails. Is this going to blow up? Is this going to explode into the scandal that will, define this administration when all is said and done, do you think, or no way?
No, I think they're going to find a smoking gun. You can't basically have emails just don't disappear anymore. I mean, it's not like the old days when you had documents, you could burn them or throw them in a garbage can or what have you. Today, everything is out there somewhere, and the idea that on these particular things that they're focusing on have suddenly disappeared is just absurd. And I think to a certain extent, the IRS, which obviously is a very important agency of the federal government, has had its sterling reputation very badly damaged by the political activity of this administration over the last 4 or 5 years. And I think to a certain extent, the American public has a right to demand to basically get this thing straightened out and to get the truth.
Let me ask you, Ed, one more here, and that is the Hobby Lobby ruling. You know what the left has done. You know how they're spinning it. Hillary says now we're like these nations that when she was Secretary of State, she saw they didn't give rights to women, and she's afraid we're falling into that realm. And, Obama's very concerned about the health of women, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz and those on the left are saying this is it. Women have no more choices left. Is this going to resonate into the midterms with a significant enough portion of the left to motivate them to come out, and will it make a difference?
I mean, first of all, this rhetoric is absurd. If you read the court, Judge Alito very carefully drew the measure, addressing the issues that Hobby
very narrowly,
very, very narrowly, and women can still have contraceptives, women still can practice birth control, all the rest of it, and have far more rights than they had when Hillary's husband was around before the Obamacare. So, but obviously, the rhetoric is always about how Republicans are trying to take away the rights of women, which nothing could be further from the truth. This particular case, we care very deeply. Most pro-life people, which is a lot of the people who are involved in this, care very deeply about the after pill and what have you they consider an abortion. They very narrowly draw this case. The judge correctly drafted in a way his opinion addressing the issues that were addressed before the court, and the rhetoric is just absurd. And, I think both sides are going to get energized. At the end of the day, there are a lot of issues out there that matter greatly to people, this being one of them. at the end of the day, this is not going to have a big impact on the election.
Ed, have a great, happy, healthy 4th of July, sir.
Take care.
Thank you. Ed Rollins, ladies and gentlemen. We'll speak to him next week on the road to the White House. When we come back, it's Gimme 5 right here. Keep it where it is. Steve Malzberg's show only on Newsmax Television. Stay there.